And we'll have our reading for the week from Rays of the Long Light.
Week 12. We are children of the light. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it, within your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. It is common for people to perceive themselves according to their present realities. A person in ill health may say, I am ill. If you say, I am well, it is my body that is suffering. People in a low income bracket say, I am poor. Only the unusual person will say, though outwardly I live in poverty, inwardly I am wealthy. Thus, when it comes to moral and spiritual development, people commonly identify themselves with their weaknesses and their mistakes. They consider it almost a sign of humility to say, I am a sinner. Though in effect, what this means is that they identify themselves with their sinfulness, not with the soul's power to transcend all limitations in God. The great masters, including Jesus Christ, have always emphasized the divine potential of mankind. To encourage us, they address us as children of light, not of darkness. The Bible in the Gospel of St. John, chapter 3, makes the point that our true home is not the mud of this earth, but the light of heaven. No man hath ascended up to heaven, it tells us, but him that came down from heaven. This passage continues. Even so, the Son of Man who is in heaven. Emphasizing that Jesus, though he lived on earth, is perceived by the eye of wisdom as conscious, even in human form, of his true identity and true reality in heavenly spheres. The way to know God is to live in godly consciousness and not to bewail our imperfection and our distance from God. Jesus said, blessed are the pure of hearts, for they shall see God. And the Bhagavad Gita states, seekers of union with the Lord find him dwelling in their own hearts. But those who, lacking in wisdom, seek him with impure motives cannot perceive him, however much they struggle to do so. If you want to know God, says Paramahansa Yogananda, live in the thought that you have him already. Thus, through holy scriptures, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Good morning again. That was a beautiful reading, and it's so timely for what's happening currently in the world. The affirmation as well today. So we'll start with our Whispers reading. Whispers from Eternity, Master's book of prayers, demands, and poems, and Master told us that he would speak to us through whispers when he was no longer in the physical body. Today's reading is number 41. Wake me, that I may know that the terrors of mundane delusion are only dreams. Wrapped in the blanket of hope, I slept long, I dreamed I was sitting on a throne, my face wreathed in smiles. My smiles withered, and the petals of my merriment dropped away one by one. Suddenly, I beheld myself in rags. Seated on the hard stones of poverty, I wept, and my teardrops fell on the unheeding, unrelenting stones of my present circumstances. The world passed me by in mocking silence. I cried out for thy help, and thou didst wake me at last through the force of my desperation. I laughed to find myself at last neither rich nor poor, but safe forever in thy arms. Oh, waken all anxious souls from their dreams of smiling opulence and crying poverty. O maker of dream worlds, deliver me forever from the nightmares of disease and death. Wake me to immortality. Wake me to unshaken calmness, that I may know the fierce terrors of mundane delusion to be only dreams. So, isn't that what we need right now, is to be woken into the calmness of God, to know that the fierce terrors of mundane delusion are only dreams. And now more than ever at this time in history, we really need to connect to that calmness, that inner calmness that only God can give to us. But it's really difficult to stay calm in times of crisis. We're facing something that we've never experienced in our lifetime. And there's really no end in sight. We're not sure how this will play out, although we know that everything in life is temporary. So again, this won't last forever, but it's still very difficult to be in this consciousness at this time. This type of stress is hard on our nervous systems. Even as devotees that are anchored in these teachings, it's still very difficult to be living in a time of collective consciousness of fear. That fear is so pervasive right now around the planet that more than ever we really need to go within our heart center and find peace. And when we think about stress, stress is the difference between the way things really are and the way that we wish they were. And it's really important now that we stay grounded in God, that we stay grounded in the present moment, and to live each moment breath by breath in the consciousness that we already have God, that God is in our hearts. It's really important at this moment that we stay present, that we stay with God at all moments. I want to talk a little bit about fear and the antidote to fear, which is love and devotion to God. So as some of you know, I work at Rhode Island Hospital, and I also work at Hasbro Children's Hospital. And my job there is as a yoga therapist and the healing arts coordinator. So my role is to use yogic techniques to help people that are going through difficult times. I work in palliative care and integrative therapy. So yogic techniques for anxiety, pain management, and overall well-being. And for the last month at the hospital, we've really been talking about this virus and what we need to do to flatten the curve. We've all heard that expression now. And before the media was making a big deal about it at the hospital, they were talking about it every day because we knew in a small state like Rhode Island, we would be very quickly overwhelmed if we had patients coming in who needed ventilators or needed intensive care treatment. So every day we've been receiving these messages. We also knew that we didn't have the proper personal protection equipment, or that we would run out fairly quickly if we had a mass incidence of sick people. And things started to shut down in different ways. We have a no visitor policy now, which is really difficult to see, especially with the older patients that are in the hospital for a long time, not to have their loved ones. We also did the same thing with children. Only the parents and one guardian could be with them. So no more siblings, no visitors under 18. Then all of the programming started to get taken away one by one. All of the programs of art and music and yoga and all of the things that are sustaining to our patients. And I found that the patients I were working with were very scared. You know, people are afraid right now. We were told last week that we needed to wear masks at work all day whenever we were on the floors, because we did start to have patients coming in with the COVID virus, although they're put in a different part of the hospital. They're secluded from the rest of us. But there was this overarching consciousness of fear, and I myself was really amping up my own practices. I had Master in my heart all day long, which I usually do anyway, but I really was trying to feel him in my heart all day. I imagined him holding my hand as I walked into rooms. I just imagined that Divine Mother's light was surrounding me in a bubble of protection. At home, I increased my Kriya practice. I lengthened and deepened my meditation. But in spite of all this, the overwhelming feeling and vibration of fear at the hospital was so great that it actually made me sick this week. I became dehydrated from wearing the mask at work, and I've been having a little bit of trouble with my asthma. And I ended up in the emergency room. I needed to get dehydrated. And when I came home that night, and I knew I'd be home for the next 4 or 5 days, I realized how much tension I was holding in my body, in my mind, in my heart. And I realized that although I have this anchor in God that we all have as devotees, that the environment I was in was so steeped in fear and anxiety and sadness that it started to affect me physically. So it's really important for us as devotees to know that we have to really watch our health. We have to watch our energy as well. Yogananda said that environment is more powerful than willpower. And I really got a taste of that this week, because although, again, I was practicing my practices, I still basically succumbed to this type of environment that I was walking into. The hospital right now feels a little bit like a military zone. There's checkpoints, and no one's allowed in there unless you work there. And you know, the nurses and the doctors, people are afraid right now. So it's really important for us to really go deep into our teachings at this moment, and to really walk the talk, so to speak, of what it means for self-realization in our lives. So what do we do? You know, how do we do that? Well, today's reading teaches us that we are children of light. And this reading today is really about identity. What do we identify with? Do we identify with the material world, or do we identify with God and with that holy vibration that shines through us, with the light of God that surrounds us and is with us at all times? And God is our armor. You know, if we think about God, if we keep the vision of God and mastering the gurus in our heart and at the spiritual eye, we can imagine that we have a steel suit of armor, but that armor becomes God's light and love that protects us in these difficult times. We also have to remember right now that we're devotees of this incredible line of self-realized masters, and that we chose to incarnate at this very time as devotees. And we chose this incarnation so that we could grow as much as we could spiritually. And we are also the keepers of light. So it's up for us to really go deep in our own practices and share that light for all the people in the world now that don't have this anchor in their life, that don't have these practices, that really are afraid right now. So again, just going deep into the consciousness of God as a tangible presence in our heart at all times. In today's reading, Jesus said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." So again, the more that we can keep Master and God in our consciousness, in our heart, imagine that God is with us at all times. That's going to bring us the protection we need. And love, the power of love is so important. Love conquers all. And love creates a powerful magnetic field around us. We just, before we had to close the center, we were teaching the Raja Yoga course, and we had just done a lesson on how you can take anything and magnetize it. Any little piece of metal, if you take a magnet and run it from the south to the North Pole over and over, you create a little magnet. You can take a screwdriver and pick up a paper clip or something. And that's what we do every day when we practice Hong Sa and Kriya. Every Kriya breath, we magnetize our spine. Every time we repeat Hong Sa, we're bringing that energy up. And when we do that with love and devotion for God, we're creating this incredible magnetic field around us that protects us. And we also offer that to other people. Other people feel that protection, or they feel that love of God emanating from us. And that's really what we're trying to offer at this time. As Master said today, it will calm the storms of fear, worry, and anxiety, the fierce terror of mundane delusion. So again, the force of love, there's nothing more powerful than that. In the universe, there's two forces. We live in a duality, and we have the force of projection and attraction. And God created the world with the force of projection of light and sound. We know in the beginning was the sound, the word Om, and then God said, let there be light. So from absolute stillness came creation through light and sound. And then because we live in duality, we need the opposite of projection, which is attraction. And attraction is the force of love. That's what God gave us. God built it into us. It's one of the 8 aspects of love. And if the universe didn't contain the force of love, we would get lost in Maya and delusion. We'd be propelled out, and we would get lost in the garden of earthly delights, so to speak. Our ego would find something to keep us attached here. But because love is built into our DNA, because it's in our molecular structure, love calls us back to God. It calls us back to center at all times. And the closer we come back to stillness and the source of creation, the more we begin to identify with God and the less with the material world and the ego. Swami Kriyananda said, the best thing to do in troubled times is to love heroically. And that's what we're being called to do right now, is to love each other heroically. It's more important now than ever. There's been some really beautiful examples of heroic love in the world. And that's one of the silver linings of this deep crisis that we're facing. I'm sure many of you have seen all the beautiful images of families outside the windows of nursing homes. My favorite one, that I saw recently, it was when this first started and they closed all the visiting policy for nursing homes. There was a family, I don't know where they were, but they were sitting on folding chairs, and there was a little bit of snow on the ground. And they had brought their bagged lunch, and they were sitting outside the window while their grandmother ate her lunch in her room at the nursing home. And I just thought, what a beautiful thing. And then there's been photos of, people touching their hands between planes of glass just to know that I'm here for you, and grandchildren writing signs and holding them up to their grandparents. And that's what we have to remember, that there's nothing in the material world that can separate us from the holy vibration of love and the holy vibration of God. That the walls of a nursing home or a hospital, or even the walls that some of our leaders want to build to keep others out of our country, love cuts through all of that. It's a holy vibration. It's an energy field. And the more that we steep ourselves in that energy field, the more protected we will be. There is a world map, the World Health Organization map that we see at work at the hospital every day. And if you look at that map, it has all little red dots of where coronavirus is around the world. And then there's the lines that connect them. And when you look at that map, you realize we're 100% interconnected. There is no separation between us and every other living creature in the world. And again, this could be a positive from this crisis, is that people that hadn't woken up to that reality will now see that and realize how we're so interdependent on each other and on the life of our planet. The breath that we're breathing today, on a molecular level, that same air went around the planet, and everyone else on the planet has breathed the same breath. And we know that the sun shines equally on all of us, the rain drops equally on all of us. So it's so important for us to really get into that vibration of love and compassion for all living creatures on Earth. So you could say that we're living in the midst of a karmic bomb right now. And Yogananda talked about these times. He talked about these difficult times that would come in our life. And it's really important for us to remember that karma is always neutral. It's not good or bad. It's just the returning of our actions. So every thought, deed, and action that goes out has to come back to us in some way, shape, or form. And in this crisis, we each have individual karma. So depending on our individual karma, we'll experience it in our own way. But we're all part of mass karma right now. The whole planet, all of humanity, is part of this mass karma. And it's important to remember that we're all suffering through this together. And again, the karma is neutral. If we look at all the fear and the violence and the separation on the planet, we can understand how perhaps this is a way of that return energy. We can't live in hatred, we can't live in fear without some type of consequence from that. But Swami Kriyananda gave a beautiful example of how we can work with difficult karma in one of his treasures talks. He said, imagine that you're standing on the edge of a pond or a lake and it's completely flat and still. And then imagine a very large boulder of difficult karma falling right into the center of that pond. And you start to see the concentric circles moving out, coming towards you as you stand on shore. And then he said, imagine that you start to pick up your own rocks of positive action, such as love for God, and you start to throw that in the pond. Good deeds for others, prayer, meditation, and you start to put all of these rocks of positive activity, positive karma into the pond. And each one of those rocks of love, devotion for God, kindness to others, creates its own concentric circle that starts to meet the circle and the ripples from the difficult karma. And it doesn't mean that the difficult karma won't come to us. It just means that it'll get diverted. It won't come as a direct hit. And it's really important for us to remember that every practice we participate in, every meditation, every kriya, every good deed, every kindness, we create, again, this vibration of love and this healing balm that can help all in this time. Yogananda said that the only thing in the universe that supersedes the law of karma is our love for God. So think about how powerful that is. The only thing that supersedes the law of karma is our love for God. So the more that we love God, the more we're able to navigate through these difficult times, that the love of God will protect us. And of course, the Guru's promised that to us as devotees, that difficult karma will be mitigated for us. And we know that Master is always by our side. So now more than ever, we really need to keep Master in our heart. And the situation I found myself in this week, where I basically, my body gave in to this collective consciousness of fear that I was surrounded in. Fear lives in the heart, and it was interesting because what happened to me was my heart went out of rhythm. And it was a very literal interpretation of fear in my heart. And so what we can do is to sit after our meditation, after Kriya and Hang Sa, that silent time, to really go into the heart chakra, Anahata, sit and breathe into the center of the heart and meet Master there. Imagine Master sitting in the heart. And with open curiosity and non-judgment, breathe into the heart center and see what arises. And if fear arises or sadness at the situation we're in, worry, anxiety, it's okay. Acknowledge that it's there and then give it to Master to hold for you. Ask Master for help. And then take that energy and lift it up to the spiritual eye and visualize it burning in the fire of God's love, divine love. And that's one way that we can work with these feelings that we might be having at this time. And then also, we can breathe calmness into the heart. Imagine that you're actually breathing calmness, one of the 8 aspects of God, into the heart center and exhaling fear and anxiety. So I'd like to end with one more little story about the power of prayer. There's a wonderful writer, Elaine Pagels, that many of you are probably familiar with. She's an academic writer on religion, and she's written a beautiful book, The Gnostic Gospels, The 10,000-Year History of God. And her most recent book that's out now is called Why Religion? And it's a very personal book. It's the most personal book she's written. And in it, she tells the story of her son. She had a son who was born with a congenital heart problem. And there was no cure, and he passed away when he was 6 years old. But when he was only 1 year old, he had to have open heart surgery. And this was during the time where parents weren't allowed to stay in the hospital room with their children, but she really stood her ground, and insisted that she stay. So she slept on the concrete floor in his room next to his crib all night. And in the middle of the night, she woke up and she said that she felt that she was in the center of a circle of women holding hands, sending her love and energy. And she didn't know if it was a lucid dream or a hallucination, but she remembers looking around this circle and recognizing a very dear friend of hers from California. She was in a hospital in New York City. And she went back to sleep and in the morning told her husband about the dream. And her son survived the surgery. And about a week later, when she was home, her friend from California called her and told her that the night before her son's surgery, her prayer group had sat, a women's prayer circle sat and held hands and visualized her and her son and sent them light and prayer. And isn't that a beautiful story? And it just goes to show us that the power of prayer and the power of love, they go beyond time and space, just like the love of families sending their love through the walls of the nursing home. When we pray for each other, when we love each other, there's nothing in the physical world that can stop that energy from vibrating out to others. And the more we do that within ourselves, the more we protect ourselves as well. So remember that love conquers fear and love has no boundaries.